I'm going to do a quick intro and the kind of outlining of my thinking about fermentation, kind of drawing from an essay that I've written recently. And it kind of covers interspecies collaboration, so thinking about microbes and bacteria. And then I was going to maybe show a few books, show you some pickles and things that I'm working on, and then we can just have a sort of 10-minute discussion about fermentation projects. So one effective and fascinating way to tackle food waste is fermentation. Unlike other preservation techniques, such as dehydrating, pickling, or freezing, fermentation has the ability to transform the flavor, molecular structure, and bioavailability of foods while retaining and enhancing their essences. And there's no specialist equipment, expensive materials, speciality knowledge needed. So for me, it's one of the most important skills that we can teach ourselves and share when we're thinking about affordability, diet diversity, and resource sovereignty. So the culture of fermentation, it comes from 1,000-year-old techniques. Communities around the world have survived illness, battles, and severe weather by using fermentation. British naval ships would have stored barrels of vitamin C rich foods like sauerkraut and lacto-fermented lemons to stave off scurvy. Koreans traditionally make kimchi with their abundant harvest of brassica over the winter to keep them going and ferment slowly and mature over the Hungry Gap. So we've got the perception of it, which is, despite its historical legacy, even the mention of the word fermentation kind of brings up quite like bodily reactions. So like faces screw up, or like shoulders hunch over, or like fermentation. It's a kind of common misconception that it means something is rancid or moldy or expired. But it is really staggering how everyday items that we consume are fermented. We've got wine, beer, cheese, yogurt, coffee, salami, chocolate. So bacteria lives with us. It's alive with us. Our microbiome is inhabited by trillions of beneficial bacteria. So bacteria is us. We are bacteria. In terms of the process itself, basic lacto fermentation, so that's like pickles. It works by submerging vegetables in a salt brine to inhibit the growth of pathogenic bacteria, while it conveniently creates a really useful and livable set of environments for a benevolent strand of bacteria called lactobacillus. And this becomes dominant and then starts turning the sugars naturally apparent in vegetables into lactic acid and carbon dioxide. This preserves the food in two ways. The acidic environment means that it's difficult for other bacteria to get in and colonize, but it also creates a barrier with the carbon dioxide to oxygen. So it reduces the access to air, which will putrefy it, turn it rancid. The resulting conditions create like a fizzy mouthfeel and like tangy flavor, which is why pickles tend to have that kind of like sour tang. And for me personally, like it's a feeling of like getting over the flavor of things. Like we've become very like narrow with our palates. So when trying new foods, it's really important for me, especially fermented foods, to like not come with expectations about what I think it should taste like, and just try and like hone in on what the experience actually is. So in terms of like its importance in our diets, regular servings are proven to aid digestion and increase natural defenses against illness. So it proves critical to maintaining our physical and mental well-being. Sandor Katz, who is one of the leading experts on fermented foods, he's illustrated this in his book, Wild Fermentation, which I have, and it's very, very good. I'm just going to really quick read a quote. Bacteria are essential to life's most basic processes. Organisms of every description rely upon them and other microorganisms to accomplish many aspects of self-maintenance and self-protection. We humans are in a symbiotic relationship with these single-cell life forms and could not possibly live without them. There is widespread agreement that all life on Earth came from bacterial origins. Microorganisms are our ancestors and our allies. They keep our soil fertile and are an indispensable part of the cycle of life. Without them, there could be no other life. I mean, that's such an incredible quote. I really recommend reading his book. So in terms of doing fermentation processes at home fermentation, for me, it presents an opportunity to have a larger sphere of influence over the purchasing, processing, and preparing of our diets. So in Britain, we've become dangerously dependent on supermarkets, which stock very few culturally appropriate ingredients and even fewer products that are bubbling with gut-boosting life. So anything that's been made shelf-stable means that it's been heat treated. So all the bacteria that was used to ferment, digest, mature the foods in the first place got killed with heat blast. So the sauerkraut and the the pickles on our shelves, even though we might think they're alive, they're actually dead. So it really seems to me that we need to take a closer look at our relationship with microbes and ask ourselves, do we have a superiority complex when it comes to other than human beings? This is kind of the basis of my artistic research, thinking about bacteria, insects, microbes, yeasts as non-human collaborators. So in essence, fermentation is a collaboration between several agents, plants, bacteria, atmospheric gases, time. We humans can only facilitate the transformation or provide substrates or containers to exercise a very small degree of control. Plenty of fermentation naturally occurs without intervention at all. The other day I noticed a plum in my fruit bowl, and the yeast colonies have attacked the outside of the skin. They're kind of attacking the sugars underneath. And after removing and composting the blemishes, I was like really intrigued, and I took a bite, and it was this like intense pleasure, like a knockout sweet flesh, flanked with saliva quenching sourness. So in my humble view, an overripe plum is a precious resource of potential, and we need to decouple its value from capital. The potential for interspecies praxis, which is the way that we work with rather than against microbes and bacteria. It's really turned my understanding of food as a dead object. It's kind of turned it inside out. I now have like a prismatic, overwhelming joy to know that I'm the result of an ongoing collaboration. I'm alive because they are living. My skin is home to unique yeasts. My gut is home to amazing flora. My blood is blessed with bodies. Like I'm always wearing clothes, I'm always wearing microbes. So that's what I've been working on recently in terms of my writing. I wanted to share just a few books that I'm really keen on, and then I'll show you some pickles. So I'm going to show this again, Sandor Katz, Wild Fermentation. This is the second edition, a revised edition. The original was like a zine that he made like 20 something years ago. I went to his ranch in Texas and Tennessee last year, no, 2019, and for a fermentation masterclass. He gave me a scholarship because of some of the work that I'd been doing with this cafe project, and it was an incredible scenario. You know, we were all staying in his farmhouse in the really, it's the furthest I've been from civilization. It was up the side of a mountain, and it was incredible. This is a more techie book that he's written. This is like a Bible one. You know, if you're kind of into the more scientific sides of it, you know, there's also the Noma Ferments book. I would recommend that like as a long-term project. This one for me is a more like bodily, feels much more local and digestible with some really, really good recipes. There's also this book, which came out last year by Jeremy Amansky and Rich Shee, who are incredible food experimenters, koji experts. And they've written this book about koji, which is aspergillus, kind of mycorrhizal spores, which eat proteins in beans and legumes and like turn it into delicious like umami, amylase. Yeah, it's kind of incredible. I'll show you a bit of that. And then I got a few ferments. How am I doing for time, by the way? I'm rushing through. Okay.
You've got 15 minutes. That's
cool. I'll show you pickles for 5 minutes and then we can chat. So I've made my own miso. This is using Hodmedod's Carlin peas. So these like organic sort of British version of chickpea from Suffolk. And I've submerged some raw horseradish in it, which is a technique called misozuke. So you can kind of use the miso as a fermentation medium. So miso uses koji, so this kind of inoculated rice or bean or pulse, and yeah, it like colonizes the proteins and it breaks them down and makes all the starches and the carbohydrates and the proteins like much more accessible and creates these like really incredible deep flavors. But you can also put raw things in it and that helps pickle it basically. Oh yeah, I've got shio koji. So I got gifted some koji, some rice koji, and I just lacto fermented it in brine and blitzed it with a stick blender and then just mix it. So this is a really good for like making marinades, sauces. I added it into a cake that I made. And it's very like incredible flavor.
What does it taste like?
This, I mean, I'm not gonna eat this raw because it's lacto fermented mushroom dust basically. But it's so I fridged it, and then when I add it to cooking, as the temperature comes down, then it can start to like become active, and like basically what's in it is like loads of like microbes just like looking for the sugars and looking for the proteins in whatever you add it to. So it speeds up this degradation, this digesting of the food. So it's more of a medium.
So when you add it to a cake, you're not adding a flavor, it's doing something, it's to the other ingredients.
Yeah, so it's extracting and breaking down the proteins, which create more of an umami flavor. This is my leftovers from fire cider, which is like maybe loads of ginger and turmeric and mugwort and chilies. But I just added some salt to keep it stable. and then I add that into my cooking whenever I'm doing stir fries or curries or whatever. So it's a really good like sort of base. I could make it into a paste if I wanted, but just blitzed it. And then I've got my most recent sauerkraut. I've always got sauerkraut on the go. It's it really is like the most incredible transformation of a material from something that's raw and kind of dormant into something that's like really alive and fizzing and bubbling. And it's the quickest way to create life in something. Like have a sauerkraut on your side for 2 days and you can see bubbles and you can sort of see what the microbes are up to. So maybe that's all I'll show you.
Yeah. Can I check about the ginger one that you had there? So you just added salt to preserve it?
Yeah, I just added 2.5% to the total weight.
But you didn't make a brine or squeeze it like sauerkraut. Sorry.
No, because they'd been submerged in vinegar for so long, they kind of preserved themselves. So they had a like extra long lifespan because of the acid, and the salt basically just inhibits any bacteria. I've had this for like 3 months and I haven't touched it, and I haven't even there's nothing that even resembles mold or yeast. I'm willing. I've got like 10 minutes or whatever, so we can chat or take questions.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. So first of all, how do you prevent I can't even pronounce the name, this kind of white yeast that forms?
Calm yeast.
Calm yeast.
Yeah.
I mean, so for example, with so I make like this vinegar from, it's a bad example because it's kind of not clear, but it's vinegar out of lemon and orange skins, which I use for cleaning. And while it's sealed, no problem, while there's no air in it. But obviously, as I'm using it, I don't use it all in one go. It starts to form this white cam yeast on top over the weeks. Obviously, once it starts to oxidate. So, is there any way of kind of preventing that? I also want to ask you about when I was back,
sorry
like
to
20
interrupt.
odd years ago. 20 odd years ago, I used to. 20 years ago, I used to put a miso onto tofu and think that I was fermenting it. But then recently, and I just always thought that I'm fermenting tofu and it makes a kind of like a cheese.
Yeah.
And I haven't done that for, I can't even remember, probably 20 years ago until very, very recently, where someone reminded me of it. And then people started saying, well, actually, are you really fermenting it, given that both of them are already fermented? The tofu is already fermented, the miso is already fermented. So are you still fermenting it, or is it just marinating it?
Okay, so the calms yeast is really it's ubiquitous, really, with fermenting and pickles. It's not poisonous at all. It has a bit of a sour flavor, and it generally happens if it's if it's exposed to the air, but also if it's kind of dormant. So what I would do is just shake it, and it stops.
It doesn't bother me. I mean, sometimes I just filter it back through again, and then I can leave it for another 3 months, and it doesn't.
It does affect the flavor slightly. It is a little bit bitter. So
in this case, it's cleaning. It's for cleaning, so I don't taste it anyway.
Oh well, yeast. Don't worry. The only molds you need to worry about is if they're black or red.
Okay. What about white furry?
Yeah. If I made sauerkraut and there was white mold on top, I could just scoop the top inch off, and it would be absolutely fine. If it's black or red, you just dash the whole. I would like put it in a bonfire.
Right.
The other question.
That miso.
There's different stages of fermentation, right? So with kombucha, you generally have 2 stages of fermentation.
Kombucha.
You have the starter, and then you have your initial brew. And then once you have fermented it for 7 to 10 days or whatever, when all the sugars have kind of been eaten and it's active and there's carbon dioxide being produced, then you would strain it off and bottle it. And that bottling, that maturing, is the second fermentation. So there's no reason why you can't think of covering your tofu in miso as a secondary fermentation. You know, they are both fermented mediums, but it's curing it and also like injecting different types of, you know, life into it. So you'll get a completely different flavor as well.
So I was right, in other words, when 20 years ago, that it was actually fermenting it. It makes it an amazing kind of cheese, especially add some chili and this, that, and up to it. Wow, fantastic.
Absolutely. But this is kind of very, I find it to be extremely open and experimental, which is kind of why I think I'm drawn to it. It's like there's no kind of wrong and right answer, and you can switch in whichever ingredients that you have. And it just feels very exciting at the moment. There's like a really big drive towards fermentation, lots of like online workshops and talks and lots of like science around it at the moment. There's like lots of commerce and stuff as well that I'm not so interested in. I'm more keen on helping people find their own ways of like fermenting stuff rather than just buying loads of sauerkraut.
Great. This, by the way, is my latest one. It's Jerusalem artichoke. Fartichokes.
Fartichokes.
Fartichokes. I want to see whether it actually really does reduce the amount of gas that...
I've just made one as well. Yeah. And mine's like bubbling like crazy. Is it normal to bubble so much, the Jerusalem artichoke?
This one is dry, but I've also got another one that is in a wet brine, and oh my god, did it really
it's bubbling like crazy, isn't it?
It really exploded. Yeah.
Burp it.
Yeah, I've been burping mine, but it's like got this kind of like foamy bubbles on the top.
Scoop the scum off with a spoon. Yeah, get rid of that. Okay. This is koji. This is rice koji. So the camera's not very good, but basically it's cooked rice that's been inoculated with spores. So the texture is looks kind of chalky and a little bit furry. You can imagine like kind of mold. It's mold essentially. But this is this is kind of crazy. This is the dry medium. It's fresh, so I could add that into my cooked chickpeas if I wanted to make miso, or I could lacto ferment it and then blitz it to make my shio koji. So this is kind of the base. This is the gate, you know, I'm unlocking to a new dimension.
So it's interesting, that looks kind of like when you get the culture for growing mushrooms. So instead of using like a kind of carbon substrate and then growing the mushrooms, you're using like a protein or a starch substrate, and then you're growing them on that. Exactly.
Yeah. So the strain is Aspergillus, and each Aspergillus, I'm not a pro on it at all, but I know that each strain has like with plants, you know, some plants are grown for their leaves, some are grown for their roots. They all came from an original wild plant. So with the Aspergillus, you've got different strains that are good, you know, good at breaking down different types of protein or good at creating certain types of flavors. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm like literally just kind of opening my eyes. That book is really, really, really good. So it's very, very easy to follow as well. Humans are awesome, but bacteriums are awesomer.
Well, we are bacteriums. Where does
we are them.
Where do we begin, really? Yeah, like our guts are more bacteria than anything else. With this koji, like, how is it produced? Is it like taken from a previous one, or is it somehow like recreated in a lab now, like the stuff that people get that they're beginning to work with?
This. Someone did it in their house. It's the easiest thing to do ever. All you need to do, you can buy the spores dry, and then you cook your medium, and then you inoculate it, and then you just have to hold it at a temperature. That's the hardest bit. So you might need a dehydrator, or you might need an oven that operates at a really low temperature, or you might do some sort of like setup in a fridge with a heat lamp. You just need to keep it at a very particular temperature, and that's like, you know, that's like 24 hours. That's it.
A friend of mine from Indonesia, when she was showing me how to make tempeh, she said that she puts it literally behind her fridge because she knows it's a consistent temperature throughout the day and throughout the year.
Really good idea.
That's a good trick.
Inventive.
I don't have a fridge, but maybe I can think of something. Yeah, next to my inverter for the solar panel or something. Yeah, because a friend of mine, he made something. He was going to give me the koji to make my own, but then he was like, "Yeah, I've got this like polystyrene box, insulated box, and I've got something that's like keeping a solid temperature and humidity." And I was like, not sure how I'm gonna do that, like off grid without all the electricity. But yeah, I'm sure I can think of something.
Can I? I think Ainsley wanted to say something. I just want to really quickly reply. This is why home fermentation is so exciting, and it's such an interesting opening towards thinking about decarbonizing our diets, because all of the traditional ways of fermentation have been created thousands of years ago. You know, refrigeration wasn't even a thing. You just stick it somewhere where it's cold. So once we start digging past the kind of commercialization and the homogenization of these foods, which have been kind of forced upon us by sort of neoliberal global food market, we can really start to like interact with our ancestors and these other than human beings in very cheap and easy and like fun way. Ainsley, I heard you murmur?
Yeah, I did murmur. I went, okay. And what I have 3 kombucha batches, all thanks to Gray, Kombucha Boy. 2 of them are doing quite fine. I've got some scobies growing in there. There's some little white wisps, but the other one is stored in my kitchen. It's partly affected by the light, and there is a strange white blob forming on the surface, and I don't know what it is. What do you think that is?
Is that a pellicle?
I don't know. It's just a strange white blob, and it looks sort of gross, and I don't know what to do with it. I think I might throw it away. But do you have any idea?
It sounds like another SCOBY to me.
Yeah.
Really? Because it's not forming like a layer inside of the kombucha. It's on top, like a small glacial island.
Yeah, that's exactly what that sounds exactly like. I mean, it's not, the SCOBY is the medium. The actual lid thing is called a pellicle, but the SCOBY produces the pellicle. But I think the common sort of misinterpretation is that the SCOBY is the thing.
Okay, so the SCOBY isn't the sort of strange blobby thing.
Alien.
Yeah.
No, it's called a pellicle.
I think you need to rename Sean Kombucha Boy, because I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, you can be somebody can be the sidekick, but yeah, there's definitely some kombucha boys in here and girls. Kombucha family.
But yeah, I had the same thing with them forming bubbles. I think it can be, it's quite common. They kind of have these little bubbly shapes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, when I'm doing my kombucha, usually I like if the pellicle isn't floating, I usually think something's kind of wrong. Like it doesn't ferment as quickly, I find, if it sinks. So usually I just wait till it forms a new one on the surface, which I think happens because it forms air pockets, which allow it to float to the top, because it like the actual pellicle itself seems to want to sink if it doesn't have any air pockets in it. But anyway,
I think it's to do with the gravity of the more carbon dioxide. It actually brings it up to the surface as well. So even if it's sitting on the bottom, if it's if the SCOBY is eating the sugars and converting them into carbon dioxide, then naturally, like, it will rise anyway.
I was actually going to ask about that. My question was, well, I had a couple things. One, I was wondering if you had heard of this Russian fermented drink called kvass, and if you haven't, then definitely give that a go, because it's great.
I made one out of oats recently, and I made it 6 months ago, and it matured in its bottle. I cracked it the other week, and I can't explain how good it was. It was the most delicate, floral, delicious drink that I've ever is the best ferment that I've ever made. And I'm trying, for the love of me, to think how I did it, because I don't write recipes.
Oh no, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I fell in love with that when I was in Russia. That's great. So did you, in that case, did you ferment it like as in you left it out like on the counter in a jar or something for like a couple of weeks and then bottled it? Or
I made a starter with oats, sugar, and water. So I rinsed the oats off, and then I made a starter, which is like 1 cup of oats, 1 cup of water, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and I just stirred it and left it on the side. You know, like you make a ginger bug,
yeah,
or a sourdough mother, and then I topped that up with 3 liters of water and a couple of tablespoons of sugar, and then I stirred it furiously for a few days without a lid, get some wild yeasts in, and then after about 3 to 5 days, it was like bubbling and tasted it. It's a bit like sour and fizzy, and then I strained it, kept all that water for hair, can't you tell, for shampoo and conditioner, and then yeah, did that fermentation again. So it was very, very clear. It was like extremely like crystalline. It was minerally delicious.
wow. So you actually you didn't actually add any more oats to the fermentation, you just had the starter. Okay,
I'll give you more info about it now, but I think my time's up.
Yeah, the time is up, but yeah, maybe at the end we can come back and look at that recipe. Cool. Thank you, Sean. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, lots of ideas. And thanks for sharing the books as well. Okay, so yeah, now I'm going to talk a bit about growing staple crops. So yeah, in a way, it kind of carries on nicely from what Rakesh was talking about, because yeah, before I begin, I kind of want to say